lovely day. For those of you who are watching this at home, we love you and we pray that you will be blessed today and always. I'm feeling a lot of love for you this morning. I usually do, but for the good that was done through our church and through the Sylvania Baha'i community and others this week, the way you showed, I've seen love, people showing each other in our congregation. At Bill's birthday party and all of these things, it's just been a lot of love and kindness that our church has been involved in. You've been involved in this last week, and it's beautiful. I have some announcements to make that are, I think, pretty much all good. One is we're looking to put together a confirmation class, so if you have a young one that you think is about the confirmation age, see me. We're trying to get that together. Also, membership. If you have been a part of our congregation and you want to take that step of membership, it's important to know that we love you whether you're a member or not, and we don't exclude you for being a member or not. But a member is a sign of covenant making and keeping, and so if that's something you would like to do, we're going to make sure that that happens too, and that's a beautiful thing. Next, next Wednesday is our last regular Wednesday Lenten service. Maundy Thursday, which is Holy Week, the service is going to be 1 o'clock here at the church, and it will be a Last Supper kind of thing. Maundy comes from Mandate. And then I'm happy to say that on Good Friday, we're going to have an art installation by Judy Troutman. She's a painter, and she's also one of the founders and leaders of the Multi-Faith Council of Northwest Ohio for many years. And I gave her the things I drew last year and said, could you do something? And she was inspired to do 8 different alcohol-based paintings. They're not very large, and they're based on the what we call Stations of the Christ. And so it's instead of just going back through Jesus' passion like in the Roman Catholic Church, God bless him, just going through what happened at his time of death, it's going back to the creation of the world and going through the whole picture of how Christ is in our hearts and in our world, and in Jesus Christ. So that's on Good Friday. I'm going to be here from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, and it's going to be open to the public. And if you want to come and experience that, that's Good Friday. Then sunrise service a little bit after 7 on Easter morning, and then the regular service at 10. All that's coming up. Those are my announcements. Anybody else have announcements? Yes.
As you know, I'm a Sunday school teacher, so if you have any kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, all that good stuff, we are doing something special on Easter Sunday for the children. Well, I am. So if you'd like to bring them, you can. Everyone is welcome. And I hope to see you all there.
Thank you for doing this so much, and not just today, but for a couple of years now. God bless you. For others? Yes, Barb.
Well, I just had to report back on the Repair Cafe. It was Saturday at Maundy Library, and we had 46 people come, which was our largest ever. Several bring more than one thing to be repaired, so we kept 5 seamstresses busy and many other actually new volunteers to fix all kinds of electrical and computer type things. So I just wanted you to know it's it's a real sense of community there with people who come. Some just come every time, I think, for a good cup of coffee and to chat and bring one thing so they can come back again. But we love that. So just to let y'all know how it's going, and it's a wonderful service of our church and our community and others who are volunteering. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, if you do get the blade, 3 former mayors in the 12-point plan where they're trying to say how can we do something about the violence in our community. That was one of many meetings, but one was yesterday here at our church. And I thank Charles for making the hospitality for it, and making coffee, and then staying for like a couple hours later while people talked so that we could close up properly. Are there other announcements? Yes, Mary.
I just want to let you know that Jill and I were down at Grace Community Center this week, and walking up the path and having Sonia open the door with that huge smile to greet us at 10 o'clock in the morning, it was just such a thrill. And we made phone calls to the people who are shut-ins, and they get their boxes of food delivered by Grace. Grace actually delivers their food to them. So it's kind of a good mission week, I'd say, wouldn't you?
This is what I'm talking about. I am so amazed. We're not a big church, but we were at Grace Community Center. We were at the Repair Cafe. We had the 12-point plan of the former mayor's here. There were people loving and caring for each other. How beautiful. God bless you all. Are we ready to worship? Let's open our hearts to God. Let's love one another. Let's worship.
May we celebrate the presence of God at every turn in our lives. Gracious God, we know you are never far away. Let us worship you today and every day. Please join me in the invocation. We thank you, God, for the invitation to come here to rest our bodies and minds and refresh our spirits. Restore our spiritual truth so we may see you in the light of truth and love. Amen.
Stand if you would wish and are able and would want to sing Lamb of God. seated. I invite you to come up for the story if you wish. Try the microphone, I think. Here we go. See if this, how's this working? Here we go. So, in the box, 2 pine cones. Here they are. See them? There's 1 pine cone, and here's the other pine cone. And I want to tell you about them. One of the pine cones comes from a walk that I took with my friend John in Walbridge Park. This pine cone comes from across the street. And there were many of them out there, and I picked up one and I brought it to church. The other pine cone is from California. And it's from the largest tree in the world. It's called the General Sherman tree. And let me tell you a little bit about that pine cone. It's the General Sherman. It's a redwood tree, so it's not really a pine, it's a redwood. I'm not sure what that means. If you look at them, if you get a picture, you go home and check it on the computer and look up the General Sherman redwood tree, there will be a picture of it in there. And it's about 300, how many feet tall is it? Let me see. It's 274 feet high. And it's, so that's getting like that's high. And it's 102 feet around if you measured its circumference, and 36.5 feet if you went right through the middle at the bottom. That's how big it is down at the bottom. So 36 feet from one side to the other, and 274 feet high. And so it's the tallest, it's not the tallest tree in the world, by the way. They say there's this tree called the Hyperion tree, which is taller, but this one's tall and fat, so it's bigger. And they say it's not the widest tree in the world, not the fattest tree in the world, which they say there's cypress trees that are fatter than it, and there's this baobab tree in Africa, which is fatter. But but this one is tall and fat. So it's like the biggest single trunk tree. The reason why they say single trunk is because there's like aspen groves and banyan trees that are multi-trunk, which are huge. It goes to like a quarter mile, but there's lots of trunks. This is a single trunk. And it's not the oldest tree, which is one of the Great Basin bristle cone pine trees. But one of these pine cones come across the street, and the other pine cone comes from the General Sherman tree out in California. So, there they are. Which one do you think is the General Sherman pine cone, and which one do you think is the Walbridge Park pine cone? Which one do you think?
I think that one is the one from California. This one's the one.
Okay, what do you think about Gavin's choice? Do you like it?
Yes.
You say yes, you think so too? Well, is it because how do you make that decision? That's a good choice. You happen to be right, by the way. You're right. He's right. So why is this one, how did you choose so well? You did a good job there.
Because I've never seen these things, but I've seen these things.
Right. I was hoping you would say that. You observe very carefully. And you haven't seen pine cones like this one around, but these ones you've seen, right? So it's true for you too, isn't it?
I didn't even know that pine cones could be like that.
Yeah.
And I went across the street and see the pine cones.
Yeah, you can
They're all
see. Yeah, they're all like that. Well, I want to tell you more about the General Sherman tree. When I went out there, I walked down the path, and this was just on the ground right there by the path. So I looked up at the tree and I said, "Thank you, grandmother." Because I was thinking maybe it wasn't really a General Sherman's tree, maybe it was more like a grandmother tree, because a pine cone. So I didn't know if I was right or wrong. So I was saying maybe she's really a grandmother tree. I don't know. So I looked it up. Like, is it a boy tree or a girl tree? Because outside in the front, our ginkgo tree is a girl tree. Did you know that some trees are boys and some are girls and some are both? Of all things. Yeah. So the General Sherman tree is boy and girl both. So this came from the General Sherman tree, and that's what they call the tree now. But if you would name the tree, knowing that it's a boy and a girl, what would you name the biggest tree in the world? What would you name? Alex. Okay. Pat would be another good one, right? Could go either way, right? Okay. Well, here's the other thing. This is really why I wanted to tell the children's story after all this time. The thing about redwood trees, they say that if you plant these in the ground, they won't grow unless there's a fire. They stay closed tight, and they just don't grow until there's a fire. When there's a fire, they open up and start to grow. You see, isn't that something? The reason why they say is because when there's a fire, all the little stuff is gone and it can grow up and it gets a fair start. Otherwise, if there's all kinds of bushes all around it, it just can't get any sunlight. I can't make it. So they waits till the heat opens up the pine cone so that it can grow. How about that, huh? So it's a weird tree, isn't it? It's a boy and a girl, and it won't grow unless it's gotten a fire, and it's from the biggest tree in the world. So you're right. They will grow in Pennsylvania. I saw a place where they planted 2 or 3 redwoods at a camp in Pennsylvania. And I thought, that probably wasn't a good idea, because if they get to be 275 feet tall on a windy day, you wouldn't want to have any building near it, would you? Yeah, so I think keep the redwoods in California where they belong. But thank you very much. You were very smart. It's from Walbridge Park, and that's from California. And from the biggest single trunk tree in the world that's alive today, right here. Have a wonderful Sunday school.
God leads us in places safe and gentle, if we but follow. hands that we might do things that make a real difference in our world. Take what we have, O God, and increase it for the real work of your church. Amen.
Today's story is about the death and resurrection of Lazarus, and I'll share it with you in a minute. So, what they say when you give the ending ahead of time, you might know the ending. Lazarus dies, Jesus raises him. There's the story, but there's more to it. Let me tell you a little bit about Lazarus dying. Lazarus had two sisters, Martha and Mary, and Lazarus died. We don't know how he died, it doesn't say. But we know about death, and we know about what the death of a brother might feel like if you were a sister. No, I have two sisters. I can be Lazarus. If I go first, maybe my sister Lisa and my sister Claire will gather around me. And I don't know, I'm not planning on it. But we don't know these things. Old Father Tony, God bless him, he's still living. You can see him, he kind of bent over and he goes to a lot of events. He was at that meeting at our church yesterday. And he said that when you're around someone who's dying, this is what you should do. And I never forgot it because I thought he was right. I'm just going to share it with you. And maybe Martha and Mary, even all those years ago, knew that this was a good thing to do with Lazarus if they knew he was dying. He says, the person you love, your friend, your father, your mother, your wife, your husband, your sister, your brother, your children, says, if you know they're dying, you can do this. You can say, thank you. Thank you for all you've done for me. Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for helping me. And then you can say, you may need to, I forgive you. You made mistakes. You didn't do everything right. But I forgive you. And then, back at it, please forgive me. I wasn't always the best husband or the best brother or the best friend. So please forgive me my shortcomings. I love you. Goodbye. Makes me wonder. When I thought about my sermon, I thought about my dad who died and how I was able to be with him at the time of his death and how, I think that these things were known. But even this morning, I told my dad, even though the veil of death is still there and I'm not trying to do anything, but I felt it in my heart. So I told my dad, thank you. And I told my dad, I forgive you for the mistakes that you made in your life that I know about. And please forgive me for the things I did. God knows I did things that I regret. And I love you. Yep. So even after a person's been gone for more than a year, I still felt that was something my heart felt good about saying to my dad. So I think about Martha and Mary and Lazarus. Maybe he got a heart attack and he dropped dead and that was it. They didn't get to say anything. Or maybe he got a cold or who knows how he died. He could have gotten a little infection and died from sepsis. I don't know how he died. We don't know how he died, but we know he died. And we know that his sisters loved him very much. And so here's how the story goes. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Martha and her sister Mary. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, Lord, he whom you love is ill. So they felt like Jesus really loved Lazarus. And he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. strangely enough, he didn't go and hurry there. Isn't that a difficult choice we have to make sometimes? Like someone's having a funeral or a wedding, or they go to the hospital, or the most difficult of one of all is probably when someone's dying. We, just because they're in hospice, they might live for a day, they might live for 6 months. Like one woman that we prayed for, they said to me 3 times that she was going to die, and each time the family said, no, she's not. And the family was right. And she lived for like 9 years after that. And she went back into the intensive care unit where she had been cared for a couple of weeks, and basically said hi to everybody. And it was like a walking miracle. So we just don't know. When should you go when a person is sick? Particularly if you're far away. Should you go now? Should you wait? Jesus waited. And he waited too long, by our perspective. Then after this he said to his disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again? In other words, you got in trouble the last time you were there. Why are you going back now? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them. After saying this, he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him. So Jesus uses the word sleep for death. Let's talk about sleep and death just a little bit. How many of you are planning on sleeping tonight? All of you. Isn't it a little bit like death? When I get on an airplane, when they go to take off, I love airplanes, and I've loved them since I was a kid, and I've studied them and read about them. But when I get on an airplane, when they take off and when they land, I always pray. Because I'm always hoping that the pilot is not depressed. I'm always hoping that the pilot and crew wants to live too, and that all the mechanics did their work, and that it's going to be take off and land without incident. And statistically, they say that you're more likely to die in a car accident than in an airplane, but it could be that that's because there's a lot more people in cars. That's also like the joke where it says you're more likely to die at home. Well, then, by God, stay away from home. Good luck with that. So while I'm running the math in my head about whether I'm going to live or die, or when you go into an operation, what do? They put you to sleep sometimes. Sometimes they give you a local anesthesia, but sometimes they knock you out. And when they knock you out, you don't know if you'll never wake up again. You know that you should, you probably will, and everything will be fine, but you don't know absolutely that you won't die and never wake up again. So when you go under anesthesia, or when you get on an airplane, you can pray. And you can commit your life to God. You can also do that. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Like I was taught as a little child. I don't know if you were taught that. What a serious prayer for a kid. They probably ban it today. Anyway, when you go to sleep, you don't know that you'll wake up. So it's actually an okay prayer. Jesus compares death to going to sleep. There's something about that that's similar. So he says, Lazarus is sleeping, and we're going to go. Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to awaken him. And the disciples said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll be all right. Like, what's the point? Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought he was referring merely to his sleep. One of the problems that the disciples frequently have is taking Jesus literally when he doesn't mean it literally. He's speaking in poetic ways. And so when we read the Bible, many times we take it too literally, and we need to hear it poetically. He says he falls asleep, but he's dead. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. For your sake I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. And then they get it wrong again. Thomas, who was called the twin, says to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. So they're just like overboard. They're either like everything's fine or we're all going to die. Nothing in between, right? The glass is half empty or half full. Not with these guys. It was all the way empty or all the way full. They just did not get what was going on. And that's a lesson for us, because when you don't get it, you're normal. When we don't understand and we have more to learn, that's normal. And the good news is Jesus didn't say, oh, you dumb people, stop following me. Instead, he just patiently kept on saying, look, I'm going to do this. And he helps. He helps. He's a good teacher. He helps his students. And God is a good teacher. He will help you, and he helps me. So even though Thomas, the twin, got it wrong, it just shows that that's not uncommon. So when Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. 4 days. And that was in the tomb. And the tradition was you buried someone the next day, so he'd been dead maybe 5 days. He was already in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. Again, at this time, Jesus was a Jew, Peter was a Jew, Mary was a Jew, Martha was a Jew. They were all Jewish. And yet in the Gospel of John, he talks about people who are Jews as if everybody isn't. This shows when they were referring to a Gentile church that did not necessarily understand these things. So when you hear many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary, I don't want you to hear anything anti-Semitic in that coming from me. They were all Jews, but he was saying these were people from Judeans coming from Jerusalem out to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. So that's a good thing. They knew Martha and Mary, and they wanted to console them, just like we go to funerals and try to say, we'll be there for you, and console them, and bring them potato salad or whatever. Do what they need to take care of them. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him while Mary stayed at home. So there's like 3 ways to interpret this story. The first one is just Jesus is the miracle man. Woo! So you need a miracle, you just ask Jesus, because that's part of the meaning of the story. The second meaning is it's like a parable, and it's like Lazarus could stand for Eliezer, which is what Lazarus is in the Hebrew. And it could mean that he represents the Gentiles, and Martha and Mary could represent the church somehow. Martha could be or it could be like the psyche. Martha is the thinking part, Mary is the feeling part, and Lazarus is the dead part. So it could be like that as well. And I'm going to try to say that it is something that applies to us, that you and I ourselves could be Lazarus. So Martha heard that Jesus was coming. She went and met him while Mary stayed at home. You ever be so upset and mad you don't want to talk to somebody? That's maybe what Mary was doing. But Martha went to Jesus. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. Amazing words coming from Martha. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Great words from Jesus. But Martha, like the woman at the well, pushes back and says, Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. So like Jesus is the last day, Jesus is the resurrection and the life. There's something about Jesus that is divine, that transcends, that comes into the world. And then he goes on to say, those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. And that's been the part that we read these at funerals a lot. But that second part is particularly challenged. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. And again, what does that mean? Because every single person that Jesus ever healed died later. They're not walking around today. So it's probably that he didn't mean it in a literal way, but he meant it in a spiritual way. So if you live and believe in him, you're never going to die. And then he says, do you believe this, to Martha? And she said, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. What a great, great name, Martha. What a great testimony. The New Testament is filled with affirmation of women and how many times the women get it right when the men get it wrong. The men were like, he's asleep, let's die with him. And Martha's like, you are the Messiah, the teacher. And it's like, the women get it right, the men get it wrong. And in the day that this was written, when men pretty much ran everything and women didn't, this was pretty radical stuff if you had the ear to hear it. Yep, so when you ladies speak, I better listen, and the rest of us better listen too, because wisdom is spread all around, isn't it? Okay, so yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. When she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, the teacher is here and is calling for you. Was that a fib? We don't see in the Bible where Jesus said, where's Mary? Get Mary to come here. We don't see that. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But maybe Martha was just working her sister, saying she knew that Mary needed to go see Jesus too, and so maybe she told a little white lie. I don't know. But she said, Jesus is calling for you. Maybe she saw deeply that Jesus is always calling for us, and she was speaking from a deep spiritual place. Maybe Jesus is calling for you right now. Oh, when she heard it, this is Mary now, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but he was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The same thing that Martha said. And the same thing that we say. Where were you, God? Where were you, God, when this tragedy hit my family? If you had been here, they wouldn't be dead. We say the same thing. So where were you? We cry. The truth is deeper than just the circumstances, but it's difficult. There's no getting around it. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus began to weep. In the King James Version, it's 2 words. Jesus wept. The shortest verse in the whole Bible. Jesus wept. Now, after someone dies, I'll often come to them and say, how are you doing? And they'll say, oh, I'm okay, but sometimes I cry. And that, to me, is, I wonder if people would ever say, I cry a lot, but sometimes I don't. It's like, we act like the crying is a bad thing. Like we should be together. Like, yes, I'm bothered, I feel it down inside, but I don't cry because I got it together like that. Jesus wept. Mary wept. Martha wept. It's good to weep. Hearts were meant to be broken. Broken open. Burned so they can grow. Pine cone has to open. Sometimes it's great suffering that awakens us from our death. Jesus wept. So, there are some things that can only be seen through eyes that have cried, said Oscar Romero. So, weep away. There's a time for weeping. And there's a time for laughing and dancing. There's a time for everything. I remember when my grandmother died, I didn't cry, and I thought there was something the matter with me. I thought, why am I not crying? I love my grandmother. She was a good grandmother, and I don't know why. I thought there's something the matter with me, and I thought I must be one of those broken ones, that doesn't have something right with them, because I didn't cry. I felt nothing. It's like grandmother died, it was like, okay. But about 2 years later, it was after church on Sunday, so things happen in church sometimes. And I don't think the church service had anything to do with my grandmother. I don't even remember what on earth the minister said, except I think, if I remember correctly, it wasn't very good. So it was like, not like, wow, that was a great sermon. It was more like, well, this Sunday wasn't very much. But then I went home and I cried my eyes out for my grandmother. There is a time for weeping. And what I realize now is everyone grieves their own way, and it's okay to weep, and it's also okay to be numb or to feel nothing for a time. We can't judge each other. You cry too much. You don't cry enough. You shouldn't cry now. You should cry there. Just let people grieve as they will. Let people alone. Affirm them and come alongside them, but don't try to correct them, because you're not God to know that this is the time to cry and not that time, or this is how you should feel and not that way. It's usually about our discomfort, not theirs. So he wept. Jesus wept. He had the abundant life. He was filled with God. He knew what he was going to do, but even so, still he wept. Like he wept for Jerusalem. Like he would weep because love cares. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. And some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, a stone was lying against it, kind of like Jesus' own resurrection. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the thinking one, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, already there is a stench, because he's been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth. And his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. So there's 3 meanings to this story. Maybe more. Is Jesus the miracle man? You need a miracle? Come to Jesus. That's fair enough. Many of us have had amazing answered prayers from time to time. Second meaning is it could be a parable about the Gentiles coming to Jesus. It could be an ancient way of describing the growth of the early church, that the one who was dead, the Gentile, Eliezer, became alive in the church. And Jesus loved the Gentiles and cried for them and raised them from the dead after centuries of being excluded from God. Now they were out of the tomb and they were with God again. So it could be a parable like that. But what I want you to see most of all is the third meaning, my favorite one, which is it's about you. It's about me. I'm Lazarus, and maybe you're Lazarus too. And death or falling asleep is a way of life that is empty of purpose and meaning, that's filled with sin and fear, and that, or in some ways, we are less than we could be, at least that. And we could say, oh God, I feel like I'm dead. Or we'd even say, oh God, I wish I was dead, or I want to be dead. But about death, and you would say, oh God, raise me up from this death. Take my life, and raise me up, oh God. So, what about the people that died, right? They die and they have these experiences, they see the light, they see their grandmother, they see their grandfather, and those stories happen a good bit, and they are wonderful. They're great encouragement to me. My mother had an experience where she says Dad came to her one night and said, I love you, it's okay. What's that about? Weird stuff, right? And they say that when a lot of people, they say, I don't want to go back. But they say, yeah, you got to go back. And there's stories like that too. Can you imagine Lazarus? 4 days? And then it's like, after 4 days, it's like, you, Lazarus, come forth. And he said, I don't want to go. But back he came. And we may not want to go back. We might want to stay in bed. We might want to stay dead. But Jesus calls us to a life of purpose. And just like Jesus says, Lazarus, come forth, Jesus could say that to you. Come forth and live. You are too dead. Come forth and live. What does the lived life look like? Well, we know it looks like love and joy and peace. It looks like integrity and kindness. It looks like bringing hope to others. So there you have it. There's the story. And there's lots of different things you could have heard in that sermon that could be takeaways. You figure out what on earth I meant. So here's the thing. The pastor says, in order to balance out last week's 20-point sermon, next week's sermon will be pointless. So, there were a bunch of points in there. And maybe one was for you, and one was for you, and one was for me. But I hope and pray you were all blessed today in facing death and life and Jesus together. Let's take the benediction together. Jesus came into Galilee, preaching the good news of God and saying, the time is fulfilled, the realm of God is at hand. Repent and believe in the good news.
And all God's people say, Amen.